individuals, and we make assessments on them based on the visuals. But what we found is that a lot of people were saying the reason that I'm sitting on the side of the street is that I can't get a job, or I don't have access to housing because housing is unaffordable in the community. And so what we knew is that we really needed to look at this issue differently, and really assess what does it look like to serve that population. The other thing that comes along is the mayor is very good friends with Malcolm Gladwell. Malcolm Gladwell wrote The Tipping Point in Blink, and it becomes a pivotal a part of the equation. Malcolm and Helen Thorpe had actually worked together at the New Yorker, and Malcolm goes to Reno, Nevada. He got very interested in this mayor and his crazy and wacky idea of ending homelessness, and so he goes to Reno and he meets a guy by the name of Murray. Murray is your chronically homeless guy. He has a beard, he's drunk, he has a bottle in one hand, a sign in the other, a shopping cart. He'd been chronically homeless for about 8 years. He had a mental health issue, and he had a substance abuse issue. And he went in and out of shelters, and he went in and out of emergency rooms, and he went in and out of detox centers. And he's a good guy. Everybody knew Murray. And 8 years after becoming chronically homeless, Murray died. And he died alone, and he died cold, and he died under a bridge. And Malcolm went back, and he went back to the emergency rooms, and he went back to the detox centers, and he went back to the shelters. And not only did everybody know Murray, but Murray had kind of racked up a few bills over time. And over 8 years, Murray had never had a single day of housing. And over the course of 8 years, the city of Reno spent $1 million providing Murray with services. I love talking to my students at DU. I'm always curious about how many of them think they could live indoors for $1 million over 8 years. Most of them can. And what it did is it started to reshape our perception of who our homeless population was. And as the mayor talks about this, and people say, well, why would you do this? Why is this even a part of your administration? Why is this an important issue? At the end of the day, first of all, it's the right thing to do. And with 5,000 men, women, and children, with 46% of them being women and children, that it's unacceptable that we have women who are sleeping in the backseat of a car with 2 kids because we don't have access to affordable housing. But if you can't wrap your brain around the right thing to do, it's also the smart thing to do. We came back to Denver and we started to look around to see if we had any Murrays. We found that it was costing us about $40,000 a year to keep one homeless person outside under a bridge. So as you pass the homeless guy on the way home, who's under the bridge or who is pushing the shopping cart, when that guy goes into Denver Health Emergency Room, he costs an average of about $29,000 per visit to service those individuals because they haven't access to medical care or health care over the course of 8 years of being homeless. We went into detox. We didn't check into detox, but we went into detox, and we went in there and we found our own Murray. We actually found 25 frequent flyers, and we started to learn a little bit about our homeless population, and the 25 frequent flyers at Denver Cares logged a cumulative total of 2,657 admissions in 1 year, which is about 100 nights per year. We found our own Murray. He went into detox 256 days of the 365 days in 2005, which meant that every day he would get up, he'd get intoxicated enough to get picked up by the police. Police would book him for $117, move him through Denver Health Emergency. They'd clear him in Denver Health Emergency. We'd put him overnight in detox. He'd get up the next morning. He'd say goodbye to the staff. The staff liked him. He liked the staff. We spent $320 a night providing him with services, or about $120,000 worth of Denver taxpayer dollars in 2005. He was more addicted at the end of the year than he was at the beginning. He could have stayed at the Brown Palace for less and could have stayed the whole year instead of just 3/4. And we decided that that was probably not a good way to spend our money. And so we went and we looked at these 25 frequent flyers and we said, hold us accountable. That we said, we've really got to start digging into this issue, that ending homelessness is not just about building housing and doing nice things, but ending homelessness is about getting strategic and smart about how we do business. So we took every one of those 25 guys that was living in detox and we put them in housing. We surround them with services, mental health, substance abuse, and medical services. And an amazing thing started to happen, that when you start giving people access to employment, when you start treating their substance abuse and their mental illness, when you start giving them medications and you start mentoring them, that we had an 80% reduction in their admissions, that we went down to 541 admissions in a year. It's not perfect. But when you're dealing with such a hardcore population, what we know is that not only can we give people a better quality of life, a better purpose, but we can also actually save our city money doing it. And so we took the costs, and what we said is that in the first 4 years, in order to move this initiative forward, that we really needed it to be a community-owned effort, that we said that 50% of the dollars of the $46 million that we estimated it would cost for us to start making inroads on our homeless population would have to come from new public dollars, new federal, state, and local dollars. And it didn't mean taking money from here and moving it over here. It meant going to Washington, D.C. and saying, we need to figure out other resources for us to build housing. And so 50% of that $46 million came from public. 25% came from the foundation community, and to date, Denver has one of the most significant investments from their foundation sector of any other community in the country. We have 23 local foundations at the table. I will again acknowledge the Denver Foundation as being one of our 23 and one of the first at the table that said we have to start thinking differently about this issue. And the foundation community came to the table and really leveraged the support of the business community. Business leaders like Peter Bowes in the room who said that we have got to start thinking differently about our homeless population, and we started to see corporate and individual investment come in. In the first 4 years of Denver's Road Home, we raised the $46.1 million that we said we would do to end homelessness and to invest in housing. And what we said all along, and what we said to the Denver Foundation, what we've said to the corporate community and the Downtown Denver Partnership, is that when you write us a check in the first year, hold us accountable. When Annie Warhover in the Colorado Health Foundation wrote us, committed to $1 million over 3 years, we said, after the first year, if you don't see results, stop writing a check. That you should look at the numbers and look at the outcomes and see if that is a good investment of your money. And what we found is that as we started to use our money differently and as we started to invest differently, the outcomes came along with that. In the first 3 years of the initiative, we actually had an 11% reduction in overall homelessness. For the first time in 20 years, our community actually saw a decrease in homelessness. That year after year, we'd seen increase after increase in homelessness, and it was the first time that we actually started to see fewer people on the streets. I'm going to update our numbers a little bit in the sense that year 4 just came on July 1st of 2009, and we've actually created over 1,500 new units of housing. Every one of those units of housing has mental health, substance abuse, and medical services attached to it. At the same time that we've been providing housing for the homeless, we've also been preventing new homeless people from becoming homeless in the first place, providing them with eviction assistance and support. We've provided over 4,000 homeless people with employment assistance now, and actually to date, 562 families have been mentored through the Faith Initiative. That we're on track with our goals, objectives, and outcomes. And we know that as we move into a really challenging year, we've had a number of questions about, well, what's going to happen to the mayor's plan? Is it going to be the 30-year plan to end homelessness? That we remain committed to having a 10-year plan to end homelessness. We'll have to recalibrate our plan. We'll have to think differently. We'll have to think strategically. But the mayor remains committed to making sure, and our message is very consistent, that there's never been a more important time for Denver to have a plan to end homelessness. I'm going to go through a bit of the numbers. I think in terms of innovations, what's worked has been the leverage across sectors. The city council last year actually voted to reinvest our cost savings. Our cost savings have been very compelling. That as we've moved people into housing, I'm going to go back to one slide here. The Colorado Coalition for the Homeless. When people say, well, how do you know if it's working? I don't buy it. You got a chronically homeless guy. What happens to these guys? What we know is that the Renaissance building, the building right next to the YMCA, John Parvinsky created 100 units of housing for the chronically homeless, made the neighbors very excited. And when he did it, he said, not only am I going to create 100 units of housing, but I'm going to put the most chronically, the most mentally ill, the most substance-dependent human beings in that housing development. Made the neighbors really excited. And he said, I'm going to surround these people with mental health and substance abuse and medical services. And an amazing thing happened. 2 years later, those 100 people, the community said, well, that'll never work. It'll be crazy. 2 years later, of those people that moved in, we have a 77% retention rate, that 77% of the people are still in the housing units. The average length of homelessness of these people is 8 years. What's interesting is that when we started to put them on benefits and we started to provide them with mental health and substance abuse support, the average income of these guys when they moved in was about $185 a month. They're getting a government check. 2 years later, they're actually contributing to their rent. that their income's almost quadrupled, that they're making over $400 a month, that when you actually provide people with services, most of these people actually become more productive. Every single one of our homeless people, we do not create free housing for the homeless. Every one of our homeless people pays 30% of their income towards their rent. Not only do they do that, but not only do they contribute to their rent, but they save us money because they stop going into our emergency rooms and detox centers at the tune of about 60%. The number that we're most excited about right now is that our jail census, as we worry about our jail filling up too quickly, my message is that we will not be filling them up with homeless people, that our jail census of homeless people right now is down 22% because of the work that's happened in the community with the outreach workers and the police department.